Hello, my name is Henry Silverman, and today I would like to talk about the ethical issues in the support trial. The support trial investigated targeted ranges of oxygen saturation in extremely preterm infants. The reason for this study was because the safest ranges of oxygen saturation in preterm infants were the subject of debate. Accordingly, this study randomized infants to either a lower 85 to 89% saturation range or a higher 91 to 95% oxygen saturation range. The results of the study showed that there was an increased mortality in the group randomized to the lower oxygen targets. So this provided important information to doctors caring for preterm infants. Good study? Well, the Office for Human Research Protections, the federal agency that monitors clinical research in the U.S., had a different idea. They were concerned that the informed consent forms failed to disclose the reasonably foreseeable risks of retinopathy at the high oxygen levels or impaired brain development and death at the lower oxygen levels. For example, in the informed consent forms, most institutions had the following language. Because all of the treatments proposed in this study are standard of care, there is no expected increase in risk for your study. Essentially, OHRP were concerned that the investigators were telling the parents that this was a low-risk study, and they were concerned that the parents were led to believe that the study arm oxygen targets represented standard of care. On the other hand, the support investigators claimed that the oxygen targets did represent standard of care. They claimed that because the oxygen targets of the two study arms were within the overall range of currently used interventions, the study represented no more than minimal risk research because the study arms represented standard of care. Is that true? Although targeted oxygen saturations were within usual practices, the doctors in the study were restricted to these ranges. However, in standard of care, doctors have the ability to treat within the full range of oxygen levels, not just within the restricted levels that existed in the study. Indeed, a review of practices in the neonatal units show that doctors do treat preterm infants using the full range of oxygen levels. A more recent study shown in this slide concluded that while the high oxygen saturation target range of 91 to 95% was consistent with usual care or standard of care, the low range, however, 85 to 89%, was not used outside of the support trial according to surveys and clinical studies of usual care. So now that we have shown that the study arms did not represent standard of care, were there additional foreseeable risks because of that? Well, the short answer is yes, for several reasons. One, the support study did have reason to believe that there would be a difference in study outcomes, and in fact, that was the goal of the study. Also, it is important for doctors to have the flexibility to treat within the full range of oxygen levels rather than a restricted range. For example, if a doctor is presented with a preterm infant with rising lactate levels or bloody diarrhea, they may want to use more oxygen in order to treat the rising lactate levels. So because the doctors in the support study were bounded to restricted levels of oxygen levels and did not have the flexibility to go beyond these restricted levels, one could say that there were additional foreseeable risks in the support trial. So let's review what we have so far. One, the study arms did not represent standard of care, and two, there were additional foreseeable risks to the infants. Unethical study? Well, not necessarily. However, the informed consent forms needed to contain several elements that were not present in the informed consent forms presented to the parents. These additional elements included the following. One, the informed consent forms needed to explain the experimental nature of the restricted ranges of oxygen saturation targets. Two, the informed consent forms needed to explain that there might be additional foreseeable risks from randomization. And finally, the informed consent forms needed to explain how the different ranges of oxygen levels involve a trade-off between a risk of retinopathy on the one hand and a risk of death or neurological injury on the other hand. So in summary, the support trial did provide important scientific output. However, there were ethical issues. The study arms did not represent standard of care, there were additional foreseeable risks, and the informed consent forms were deficient in not explaining these issues. Thank you very much.